Thank you for joining Sports Drive once again. I'm your host, Preston Moore. Joining me now is Alan Roberson of the Sports Nerds, Jake's co-host. We had Jake on earlier. Alan, you're back on the show. Glad to have you here. Now, we mentioned earlier with Jake, you, as we know, are a very big Kevin Durant fan, so it's been a big couple days for you. As a KD fan, how do you feel about this trade?
Man. Well. First and foremost, I have to backtrack just a little bit as far as first getting the news. I'm driving back to my home, grab some food with me, rather late night, things like that. I'm just thinking it's gonna be a cool, easy, chill night. You know what I mean? Yes, the trade deadline is now, as of where we are, coming past, but sure enough, I kid you not, I laughed for a smooth 10 minutes nonstop. Like I was trying to breathe, I was trying to collect myself, I was trying to gather what in the world is all of this, what sense is to be made out of all of this. And listening into a little bit whenever you and Jake were speaking about this, we all kind of had an understanding as to where KD's headspace was at. I mean, whether it was an assumption or obviously it ended up being what it is as far as getting out of Brooklyn. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about it within the show later on this evening. But when it came to the past big three, big four, if you want to bring in the Ben Simmons of it all as well, a complete and utter disappointment. As far as as far as the biggest disappointment in sports, probably, just from where I am right now, I can't really give you any other names that could possibly pop up in my mind. I can only have imagined if the KD Golden State Warriors didn't win back-to-back championships in 2017, 2018. That probably would have taken the cake by far. But you're bringing in a 29 points per game score. You're bringing in somebody who, as a Brooklyn Net, has had the highest point per game average out of anybody to don the New Jersey or Brooklyn Net jersey on 50, 40, 90 shooting. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, you're keeping Chris Paul, you're keeping Devin Booker, you're keeping DeAndre Ayton, and you're also bringing in TJ Warren, who, depending on how people talk about the bubble back in 2020, was one of the greatest anomalies we may have ever seen this side of insanity, to be completely honest with you. So from a team perspective, it's very hard to find a team that is just head and shoulders better than them in the Western Conference. Denver is still nice from record-wise, and obviously the MVP, the reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic. You're looking at new formed teams like the Dallas Mavericks. Kyrie had a pretty solid game last night with close to 25 points. Luka obviously was not out there, so I would love to see how that pairing is going to coexist throughout the duration of the second half of the season. But really from there, I'm sorry, I'm definitely not sold, regardless of what this trade was with Memphis. I'm curious as to where the Clippers are with all the trades that they've made throughout today. The Lakers, not so much self-explanatory, but you have more size at your disposal now. And that would only hope that instead of Anthony Davis, which y'all mentioned a little bit within the first segment, instead of Anthony Davis having to clang and bang with the Jokic's, with, the list goes on, with the DeAndre Aytons, the Rudy Gobert's, Karl Towns of the world, now you can throw in a Mo Bamba into the mix. Thomas Bryant was kind of that guy, but more depth and more versatility within those bigs, I think, will pay enough dividends to get them into a much better spot as to where they were last year. Mm-hmm. But I'm really trying my best not to fly off the handle when it came to this move, because holy bleep, this looks absolutely insane to think about on paper. And the 30 for 30, I sure would love nothing more than to see the on paper 30 for 30 when it comes to what used to be with that Brooklyn Nets squad. But even with the Nets still spending a little bit of time with those guys, you still have Ben Simmons, who I can hope that with more time and more looks can finally get into that groove and finally get into that bit of confidence that he had a smooth 7-8 years ago, which is weird to think about, but that's very much the case. Mm-hmm. Cam Thomas has been a walking bucket since LSU days, and now obviously on a national scale over these past couple of weeks. Nick Claxton is an underrated DPOY, if not probably a top 3 favorite when it comes to bigs for DPOY, the way that he's been playing this year. Also, you still have Joe Harris, you still have Yuta Watanabe, you still have Joe Harris, you still have a whole multitude of shooters and 3-and-D guys. Now you're bringing in 2 of the bigger 3-and-D guys from that Phoenix team, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, who I'm assuming won't be on the move. Well, obviously the trade deadline is passed, so we are where we are within this team. I still think this is a team that could make things tough, not just within this year, but let's say the next 2 to 3 years, with the added draft capital that they doubled back and received after mortgaging everything into these superstars and it resulting to a playoff series win, but nothing really else to show for it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting on both sides. Personally, I mentioned it earlier. I don't see how the Suns lose the NBA championship at this point. I hope it's not a runaway. I'm not necessarily a Suns fan. I'm not anti-Suns, but I just want good competition. As a Spurs fan, my horse is out of this race. So I'm just hoping that it's a good competition in the playoffs. The Suns now are my favorite to win it all. The Lakers seem like they could make a push now after the moves that they made. And you mentioned a lot about the Nets. They're getting some players now. They have lost their big three. Yes. Ultimately, one of the greatest disappointments in sports history. Yes. However, right now, looking forward, they've got some players who can kind of balance out Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons pretty well, who I think Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons are arguably, at this point now, their best two players. Maybe you put Cam Thomas up there, but maybe it's too early to tell with him now. But as we stand right now, you have some solid players. You have shooters. You mentioned 3-and-D guys. You have guys who can spread the floor around, and we know that Ben Simmons isn't a shooter, so you got to surround him with shooters because he sure can pass. So there are some things to look at with this Nets team. You mentioned, I think that they could also give some teams some trouble. I don't know how much trouble we'll see. But yeah, it's been a very, very interesting trade deadline. I feel like I'm just kind of been scrolling through it all, trying to come up with more, but I mean, we can't even get through everything that has happened. But yeah, I mean, really just wanted to talk to you about that KD stuff. Do you think now, yes or no, do you think the Suns are the favorite to win the championship?
It's very easy to say yes. Trust me, I'm trying my best not to be of that side of thinking because I've been saying this for the Brooklyn Nets over the past 3-4 years. Let's say a whole 5-10 years down the line, Brooklyn can maybe double back and get into that conversation. But when it comes to Phoenix, I think that yes, they are. Obviously, that does come with a form of expectations with that. I cannot wait until Phoenix plays Dallas. I do believe that first game will be early next month in Dallas. I certainly can't wait for potentially the first time in 5 years seeing KD versus LeBron play now that they're right there in the same conference, which also, by the way, side note, definitely not trying to, at least not for myself, stepping on a milestone that was LeBron passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the all-time scoring list.
Absolutely.
But not even an entire day passed, and the entire NBA landscape was like, yeah, sorry, great accomplishment, but I don't even know about what happens in the next month and a half, 2 months for this team. I mean, I feel as if they definitely can, but when you really think about it, I would not be surprised if Denver stays where they are as the top teams record-wise in the Western Conference. Phoenix, a healthy Phoenix, can easily make that run to be right under them. And should it come down to a conference finals between those two teams, you can't go wrong with a potentially 3-time consecutive MVP Nikola Jokic and the depth that's there. Obviously, with Thomas Bryant now, so a little bit less of a load for Nikola Jokic. Almost every box is checked off for this Phoenix squad. You have the coaching, you have the shooters, you have the big men. You have the backup big men. You have wings at your disposal. You have guard play at your disposal. You just need all of this to come together. So that's my biggest concern as where we are right now for the next at least week to 2 weeks. How soon can we see this team on the floor healthy, and how much time needs to pass in order for this team to fully gel and mesh and live up to said potential as to being the most talented team in the Western Conference right now? Because that's very much the case. That's where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alan, thank you once again for joining the show. Always a pleasure. And we're excited to see what happens with this KD stuff. Who knows? I mean, the NBA, the whole second half of the season is going to look extremely different from the first half. Alan, thank you for joining. We'll have you on again if KD does end up winning that championship with the Phoenix Suns. We'll make sure to have you back on the show. But thank you for joining today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll be right back with more Sports Drive right after the break.